Hello, everyone, and welcome to our January Parent Resource Group meeting. This is a meeting that's going to be discussing treatment goals, what they entail, how you identify them, and if they need to be modified. So if you don't know, my name is Tammy Jurczyk. I'm a BCBA at Lawrence Institute for Education. I've been here about 7 years doing parent training for my clients during that time, and now have moved to a more community outreach position where we offer free trainings for parents. So if you have questions or comments about this training or any other trainings, you are welcome to reach out to me directly. Like I said, today we're going to be talking about treatment goals. So let's kind of move along and see where we end up. Okay, so treatment goals are a process that is built in order to assess development after an assessment is completed. So they act as benchmarks to kind of show where your client or yourself, where you are in relation to where your objective is headed. So when an assessment is conducted, we look at it and say, okay, this is where the goal is that we want to achieve. This is age appropriate. This is relevant to the family. And we kind of look at where the student or the child is, and we say, okay, these are the skills that we have. What skills do we still need in order to meet that mark? Treatment goals come in two forms. They come in long-term goals and short-term goals. So our long-term goals are the goals that are set to, this is the ultimate outcome. This is the age-appropriate skill that we are trying to achieve. And then we have our short-term goals. Our short-term goals are generally, we strive to achieve them in a short amount of time, and we look at them as kind of steps or benchmarks. So we're going to kind of go through a couple examples today. The first one is this one. If I do an assessment for a child and I'm observing him with his peers, and I can see that all his friends are playing soccer and he kind of goes over there and he kind of wants to play too, but he doesn't take the opportunity to go play when offered, I might look at that and go, okay, we're not quite there yet. We don't quite have the skills to engage in that kind of play yet. So what do we need to work on? Some of the long-term goals that might be built would be play soccer with peers at recess, in the fields, whatever that looks like. But the short-term goals would be much smaller, and they are things like learning to kick a ball, learning to kick a moving ball, kicking a moving ball in a specified direction, right? So those are small pieces of the much larger goal, so that I can kind of figure out what pieces need to be tailored and which deficits are at play so that I know what needs to be worked on. One of the things that we should mention is that it doesn't matter which service you obtain your goals from. So a lot of individuals have multiple service providers that provide speech and OT, PT, you have HAB and respite. Sometimes there's medical, there's ABA, and all of those individuals are building these goals for your child or for yourself. And we all look at that and say, okay, these are the goals we want to achieve, but they all should maintain or contain the same amount of information in order to be a good quality goal. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute, but I do want to just kind of caution that the phrasing of goals and the terminology used in goals is generally determined by the profession that's writing the goal. So if we're looking at an ABA goal, you're going to see a lot of ABA terminology. If you're looking at speech goals or medical goals, you might see things that are more representative of that profession. Okay, so when we are looking between the long-term and the short-term goals, what we want to make sure is that the short-term goals in culmination will lead up to those long-term goals. We are all kind of striving toward that same destination. If we're looking at a skill like doing laundry, there's a lot of pieces that go into learning to be independent and completing all of the steps for the laundry. But if we break down those steps into more short-term goals, like first I have to sort the laundry, I have to learn to operate the washer and dryer, I have to learn how to fold the laundry, eventually put it away, unless you're like my children and you just live out of a laundry basket. All of those things need to be tailored directly to that individual based on what their skill set is. So another example that I see often is when people are trying to boost their health and they train and they're training for a marathon or they're lifting weights or whatever that looks like. If I looked at, my situation and I said, okay, I'm going to train for a marathon and I want to have it, next summer when we do the run, I'm going to have that much time to complete that goal. But if I'm not tracking in the meantime, all of the small steps and all of the small progresses that I'm making, I may look at it and say, I'm not hitting my goal. I'm not meeting my objective. And while that is technically true, because the marathon I haven't completed it yet, I am gaining skills to help me complete that goal. And tracking our treatment goals is a way we do that. So right now, we kind of talked a little bit about the laundry and other specifics. Another individual or a single individual teaching another single individual, it may seem easy. So if it's just you teaching your child how to do laundry, you may be able to do all of the steps every time and kind of walk them through it without having to track which steps they're erroring on, because you'll know you're the only person working on it. When it comes to a treatment team, having those goals laid out so that everyone knows what step we're working on and everyone knows how quickly we're acquiring these skills is going to be detrimental to that child's learning. What we don't want to do is have one group of individuals teaching one part of a skill and another group of individuals teaching a different part of that skill and not having them overlap. We want to make sure that when we're teaching skills, we're kind of teaching them in a very cohesive manner. And one of the ways we do that is through the use of SMART goals. So SMART goals is an acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time. Those are the 5 components that a good quality therapeutic goal should have in order to make sure that we're making progress. And we'll go through a little bit more kind of what each one means. So when we talk about SMART goals and you're looking at your goals or your child's goals, one of the things we want to make sure is the goal specific? Do we know exactly what we're trying to achieve? And is it measurable? Do I know when we will have achieved this goal? Do I know what it entails to achieve this goal? Is it achievable? So sometimes we write really lofty goals with the idea of we'll get there eventually. And yeah, maybe we will, but that's probably not the best way to assess development if you're choosing goals that are far beyond what your individual is capable of. The other thing is it realistic? Is this something that affects your everyday life? Is this something that is really important to you and the client to achieve? If I'm going back to that scenario about the child who's trying to, play soccer with his friends and he wants to play, that is an important piece for him. If he's looking at that and going, no, that looks terrible, I don't want to do that, I'm just kind of watching what my friends are doing, teaching him to kick a ball is no longer a relevant goal for him. It's not realistic if he doesn't want to play. So we have to look at those things as well. And then the last component is a time component. We want to make sure that these are not just never-ending goals and we're just working on this forever. That is not a way to assess development. So when I'm looking at a time component, I'm looking at when do I reasonably think that this objective will be met? And depending on the profession, you might see things in weeks, months, a year. But if we're going beyond a year, we might want to reevaluate how realistic that goal is. Okay, so we're going to go through some examples. The first one is a little bit more generic. It's something that a family member might put in order for themselves. The second one is more clinical, so we'll kind of do both. So the first one says, what do you want to achieve? We want to clean out the garage, right? If your garage is anything like my garage, it kind of, I don't know, turns into like a hoarding nest of boxes and old toys and stuff that's broke that we just haven't thrown away. So the objective is to clean the garage out. So we're looking at it, we say, okay, how am I going to accomplish this? What exactly do I want? Well, I want my kids to help. I want them to come into the garage and I want them to help me put everything away. When do I think that this is done? When do I consider this a completed task? And for here, it's when I can get the car back in the garage. So it doesn't have to be spot free. I have to be able to functionally use my garage. Okay. Is this an attainable goal? Yeah, this is something that I can do. My kids are off for break. They have the capability to do it. yeah, we can do this. And then, is it realistic? Do I have all the supplies I need? Do I have any barriers? I can't clean out the garage and put things away if I don't have places to put them. If I don't have the bins I need to store things, that's not a realistic goal anymore. We're going to run into barriers. So is it realistic? Yep, I have all the barriers. I have all the storage units. We're all good to go. And then, when do I want it done by? Well, the kids are going to help me and they go back to school next week. So I want to make sure that we're done, but by the time they go back to school, by the time break is over. That is the goal. And that is gives me a time component. It gives me the specifics and how I know that it's done and when it's done. It allows me to identify if there are any barriers, any reason why this isn't attainable. Okay. On a clinical side, they sound a little more jargony. So we're going to look at them, and this one is, if your goal, you have a HAB goal, you have an ADL goal, whatever that looks like for you and your family. And the goal is, I want to have Johnny clean up his dishes after he eats dinner, right? I don't want him to get up and run away from the table. I want him to take his stuff and bring it over to the sink. So how am I exactly going to accomplish this? So when the meal is over, we signal the meal is over, he will take all of his stuff, his cup, his bowls, his plates, whatever it is that he used, and he will bring it and put them in the sink directly. That is the specific outcome that I am looking for. Okay. How am I going to know if he's doing this every time or not? Well, when he needs 0 reminders, I'll know that the task is done. So he didn't leave anything on the table. I didn't have to clean up after him. There weren't, we didn't drop it on the floor and walk away. All of those things will say, nope, we didn't achieve this. We need to continually make sure that we're practicing it. And then, is this attainable? Does he have limitations? My daughter is very, she's short, she's pretty tiny. So it's not always feasible for her to reach her glass plate into the sink. Sometimes she has to put it on the side, on the counter, because otherwise it might break depending on what else is in the sink. So are there any limitations to him putting those things in the sink? And if there are, how do we go about adjusting it? Is this a realistic goal? Yeah, this is something that the vast majority of individuals can do without prompts. If there are no other barriers, then yeah, the routine is the same every day. We absolutely can do this. And then, when do I know that it's done? How long do I think this is going to take? And what I put here was, when he can do it 5 out of 7 days of the week without me reminding him, then we are done, right? Kids tend to need reminders. That's okay. And you can make that whatever you want it to be. So I can say, no, he needs to do it 100% of the time. It needs to be 7 out of 7 days a week. It needs to be, that I don't have to remind him, even if he has to make multiple trips. So these are what our SMART goals look like. We are going to go through some examples of exactly what they look like in a therapeutic setting. I've pulled some from that I've, kind of redacted and edited a little bit, and we're going to kind of go through them. Okay, so here's a goal that was written for a consumer. It says, client will jump 8 to 10 inches forward using a 2-foot takeoff and landing, 4 out of 5 trials. Okay, so what am I looking at here? If we pull up our SMART goal, do we know exactly what we want the child to do? Yeah, we want them to jump. Do you know how we want them to jump? Yep, 8 to 12 inches using a 2-foot takeoff and landing. How are we going to measure? Right? Well, they have to meet that whole 2-foot criteria. And is this something this child can do? Yeah, this is an age appropriate goal for this child. Is it realistic? Yeah, there's no barriers that say they can't. We don't have any broken feet. We are ambulatory. We can jump down from things. We just can't jump forward. So yep, this is a realistic goal. And then, do we have a timeline in which we want this accomplished? So this one says 4 out of 5 trials. So 4 out of 5 trials means that when I attempt it 5 times, 4 of those have to be correct. Now, I would say at this point, how long do you get to continue practicing this? Is it 4 out of 5 every day? Is it 4 out of 5 over the next 6 months? What does that look like? So this time component might be a little bit sticky. Okay, let's look at this one. The client will identify and label emotions using a speech generating device, or their AAC device, for 80% of opportunities. What do we think is missing? Again, we're going to go back to our SMART goal. Do we know what we're trying to get them to do? Yeah, label emotions. Do we know exactly what we want them to accomplish? This is where I would say no. The number of emotions that exist to be labeled is a fairly large number. So this can be anywhere from 2, because it's plural. We want them to label emotions. So sad and happy, to any number of emotions or any variant of that emotion using their device. So I would say that we don't have an exact accomplishment here. How are you going to measure it? 80% of opportunities. Is the goal attainable? Well, if it's on their speech generating device and they have the ability to use that device, then yeah. Is it realistic? It might be. If I'm only asking for 2 emotions, then sure. If I'm asking for 600 emotions, then no, probably not. And then when will this need to be accomplished? This one doesn't have a time component at all. So is this over the rest of their life? Tomorrow? What does this look like in terms of time? So this is a goal that has got a lot of good foundation, but is missing some of those key pieces to say, yes, this has been mastered and they know how to do this, or no, we need to keep going. So if I looked at this as a goal as from a parent's perspective, and I said, okay, you want them to identify emotions, which emotions? How many? In context or not in context? Through pictures? When they're reading in a book? Does it not matter? Those are some of the questions you might consider asking in order to say, yes, they can do this skill, and yes, they can do it fluently, so that they don't always have to look at the same picture, or they don't have to experience that emotion in order to label it. So those are the things we kind of want to ask when we're looking at these goals. Okay. Here's another one. This one's a little bit wordy. So in the next 6 months, the client will select from a correct item from a field of, the client will select the correct item from a field of 4 for 20 items with 80% accuracy for each item across 3 consecutive sessions. Okay, let's go back to our SMART goals and see what's missing. Okay, do you know what you want to achieve? Yeah, we want them to select an item from a field. Do we know exactly how we want them to accomplish it? Yeah, we want them to be able to do 20 items in a field of 4. Do we know how we're going to measure it? Yeah, we want them to get each item correct 80% of the time. Is this an attainable goal? Yeah, there's no barriers that suggest this child can't select an item. Is it realistic? Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can pull this from, whether it's, a book and they're reading and we can ask them to select items in the book, or whether it's cards on a table, or whether it's things out in the environment. These are a realistic way to practice this skill. And then when do you want to accomplish this by? In the next 6 months. In the next 6 months, I expect this child to be able to do all of this. So this one met all of the criteria for our SMART goal standard. Okay. I bring this up because I want to make sure that we are advocating for our clients, for our loved ones. I want to make sure that when you are given goals, and you are probably going to be giving them from a lot of different service providers who have very different ideas of what your child needs or what you need, we want to make sure that we're looking at to say, is this a good quality goal? Is this a goal that's going to be able to be mastered and show development and growth? Are we working toward some kind of a real objective? Or is this just kind of like this is something that I think we need to do? And we want to make sure that if we are going to be consistently teaching these things, that we have a way to measure that growth and development. So if there are pieces missing, if you're looking at the goals that you've been given and you're like, I don't see an end time here, or I don't know how exactly you're going to get this done, you should be asking about those missing pieces to the author of that goal. So if it's your BCBA, if you're a program manager, or if it's one of your specialty therapists or your medical professional, whatever that looks like, ask them, this is the plan you put in place, but I don't know how we're going to get through this, or how am I going to know when I'm done, or how am I going to know when my child is done? Those are definitely pieces that you're going to want to ask about. So when you're talking about your child's development, you know where their growth is, where their strengths are, and maybe where they need some more support. If it is the case where you have a goal that you're like, man, we've been working on this goal a really long time, we need to look at it and say, okay, is it a manner in which the goal is written and it's not accurately representing the data that's being taken? It's not accurately representing the development of your child? Or is it that there's a barrier somewhere that we missed? And those will be able to come to light when you look at that attainable. Is this attainable? Yeah, I don't have any barriers that suggest it shouldn't be. And if there are barriers, then we can work around them and we can look at the goal maybe a little bit differently so that we can modify the objective if we need to, at least in that chunk of time. So it may be that in the next 6 months, I may have this child working on identifying objects in a field of 4, but the next 6 months, I might say, okay, now we're going to do them when we're out in the world in a much larger field of vision. So I'm no longer looking at 4 cards on a table. I'm looking at a library. I'm looking out at the park. I'm looking at where there's a lot of things that I can see, and I'm going to talk about them and I'm going to label them that way. But I want to make sure that if that's the goal I'm looking at, that I can do all the things before that, like attend to stimuli and fluctuate quickly between stimuli without being distracted, so that I know exactly what my deficits are and where my strengths are and what I can do to modify that. Okay, as always, guys, I appreciate you coming and checking us out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I left my email there for you to check out. Pause the video. We have many of these videos up with different content on our website. Feel free to check them out. And again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly. Thanks, everyone.